Hello. So dukkha, what is it? And how do we deal with it? How does it relate to the path of spiritual evolution? Now, when we begin to meditate, anyone who first starts meditating will very often, in the very beginning of each meditation session, experience a fair bit of resistance. This is very, very common. And in a lot of Buddhistic texts, this is often referred to as the flash in the pan. So that is where you sit down and the mind is erratic and it's moving at very high speeds, right? This is very common. The emotions are all turbulent and attaching to things. The mind's attaching to things. The body's been in motion. The relationship of the mind to the emotions, the mind to the body, the emotions to the mind, the emotions to the body to the emotions, the body to the mind. This has all been connected and in such a frenetic moving state that when we still one of those, the body, we become very immediately, or fairly immediately, very aware of the incessant movement of the mind, the incessant movement of the emotions. And so we'll experience this dichotomy between the stillness that we've imposed on the body and the habitual movement of the body, the habitual movement of the emotions, the habitual movement of the mind. As we become aware of these things and this difference, that difference is often perceived as pain, right? Existential pain, angst, anger, physical pain, all of these things start to jumble around because we have created a lack of alignment, right? We've created a lack of alignment by bringing one of the three bodies into stillness. It is now in contrast to the speed of the rest of the bodies. So this is where having a warm-up activity to bring you into meditation or a preparation for your stillness practice, to have something like that in place. So this would be something like maybe a series of yoga asanas, your Tai Chi warm-ups, some of your standing, some form. These exercises that help us to slowly bring the body into deeper states of release, opening up the joints, opening up the tissue, stretching, etc., etc., slowing down the body. Okay, so we slow down the body, and this starts to give an opportunity for the mind and the emotions to start to be pulled slowly into an alignment with a slower state of movement. Okay, so this becomes a bit of a doorway or a gateway to stillness. So we slow down, we open the body, we slow down, and this becomes a gateway, kind of like a gateway drug for meditation, a gateway, a doorway to slowly deeper states of stillness. Okay, now the difference, as we said, is the perception of pain, of suffering, of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness. What makes something unsatisfactory is essentially not being present. When you are present at deeper and deeper layers and levels, that which appears like suffering, turns out it disappears. So the illusion is an illusion. The suffering, the appearance of the suffering, is the imposition of preference of future and past onto the present. And this slowly over time will break apart as your relationship to time breaks and your desires start to fade. or evolve and fade and evolve and fade, and most importantly, the thing that had the desires changes, dissolves. The thing that had the aversions changes, dissolves. This is less about finding equanimity within the space of identifying as an identity that has cravings and aversions, and more so about working on the thing behind the thing, behind the thing, behind the thing, right? So this separation between right now and the part of us that is full of expectation, full of clinging to the past, expectation and clinging to the future, all of this stuff, this is the space in which a lot of this pain and suffering arises. So why is it that when we start meditating, this illusion, it won't seem like an illusion, this relationship with suffering starts to become more and more and more apparent in the perceptions? Well, as we start to come into greater relationships with stillness, with emptiness, all the parts of us that are not in a resonance with that emptiness become exposed. If we are doing energetic-based meditations and we're using the refinement of alignment with frequency and resonant with more and more refined frequency as objects of, we could say, escalating dissolution in meditation, as that process unfolds, that of us that is in contrast to those frequencies, is in contrast to that emptiness, becomes exposed. So that separation is exposed, and that separation is the dukkha. So the better you get at meditation, very often what will happen is this dukkha starts to become stronger. And it is not uncommon in any way, due to the law of rhythm, for high-level meditators to also be high-level addicts in one form or another. Because the process of release and surrender is releasing the will, right? It's releasing the coarser layer of will that would typically prevent us from engaging in activities or habits that we might otherwise have not had a hard time just setting aside. So the suffering escalates, essentially. It's like gas on the fire. The awareness, because it starts to focus and refine that much more, the concentration is so much more refined and pure, that the light of that focus, when placed within ourselves, will illuminate desire. It'll illuminate craving, it'll illuminate aversion, it illuminates the identity, and once again, fuel to the fire. So as we go through this process, all of that extraneous wandering of the mind, wandering of emotion, and all the energy that those wanderings pull away from us, that energy is no longer just dissipating, so it starts to build. Okay, now this is apart from energy-based meditations where you're actively trying to build energy. This is just the simple exercise of focus, of concentration, will build massive amounts of energy simply because we're not losing all that energy through all these holes of the wanderings of the mind and wanderings of the emotion. And of course, all the wanderings and fidgets of the body as that energy is escaping in different ways. So the focus builds, the energy builds, and that energy then fills us, and it is fuel for both good and bad. That is what we need to remember here. It is fuel for both good qualities and bad qualities. So, fuel for the good, fuel for the bad. This means that it's probably pretty important that we start to take into consideration what our negative habits might be and what our positive habits might be. So this is the cultivation of the black and white mirror, right? The black and white mirror of the soul. Coming into recognition of those aspects of ourselves that are positive, that are in resonance with our continued growth along the path, and of course those aspects of ourselves that are, we might say, our lowest, that are pulling us back. So the law of rhythm will catapult us back and forth. Okay, now this can be for a number of reasons, but in big part it is this law of rhythm. It is this escalation, this increase of energy due to concentration, due to stillness, and then we start to experience this. So some people will sit down. I had a friend many years ago who told me every time I meditate, I try to meditate, I get angry. Therefore, meditation makes me angry. Now, when you come into stillness, you become aware of that, of you, those parts of you which are in habitual engagement, habitual doing, we might say. And often when we're in constant movement, we don't notice the part of ourselves that are constantly doing a thing. And that thing might appear static, okay? But stasis, stagnation, this is in contrast to the reality of Nietzsche, of change, of the constant change. Stagnation is the thing that's being done, right? It's the thing that's moving in relation to the stillness, or that is still in relation to the constant movement. So these aspects of ourselves right from the get-go will start to come up in the awareness due to the increase of concentration and energy. Therefore, we have the opportunity to explore these and not just sit within that particular pain and indulge in our habits of emotion and habits of view and perspective and thought, and indulge in our own grandiosity as we come up with all kinds of stories and rationalization for why we deserve to have those feelings and thoughts, etc., etc. But as we continue looking for stillness, looking for emptiness, we'll find that those habits are actually things that we're clinging to. The same way that we pick up a ball or anything, literally anything, pick up a mug, there's a contraction which holds that thing. And when we let go of it, it's because everything was able to release. And so these habits of mind, habits of emotion, habits of body, these clingings, they start to dissolve. We become aware of that aspect of ourselves which is holding on, grasping, clinging, contracting, and we're able to release that. Okay? And this is very important because it is the first step towards recognizing a few things. One, that we can be free of the tyrant that is ourselves, right? That is the acquired self that we've been essentially indoctrinated into by our own experience and by our relationships to our own experience, our attachment to our own experience, the meaning that we give our own experience at every layer, subconscious, conscious, right, all the way back. And this is of crucial importance. Okay, so these experiences, they become quite formative, and then we grasp them. So this letting go, boom, now we can be suddenly free of ourselves. And this comes in stages because there's always deeper and deeper layers that are still clinging. And so as we permeate the depths of a realization or a realized, it's almost like an identity, but it's not an identity. As you realize the nature, we could say, of emptiness more and more, of your personal Akashic consciousness and that relationship to the cosmic Akashic consciousness, on, deeper and deeper aspects of ourselves are able to release. So the process keeps unfolding. So we are able to be free of ourselves at greater and greater layers. And of course, through this, we are able to develop, through freedom, agency. Freedom gives us actual agency. What are the thoughts that you've always had? What are the feelings that you've always had? And agency doesn't come from, we could say, spiritual agency. Spiritual will doesn't come from the contractive identity. It comes from the liberated dissolution, from that freedom, that omnipresent freedom, that omnipresent free flow of movement, not from the contracted three-dimensional identity. So anytime we connect to something somebody says, we go, oh, I like that. Like, I'm going to hold that idea. I'm going to hold those words. I'm going to hold that thing. It resonates with me. So we grab it, we hold on to it, and we make it ours. Then we share that proudly. We attach to it. And we have to remember that the words are always, at best, a finger pointing to the moon, so to speak. So this aspect, this process of dissolution continues to unfold. And now this video is on dukkha and suffering. So why is it that the addictive tendencies would rise? Well, as we mentioned, the energy is fuel for both the good and the bad. Now, as the refinement of the dukkha that's present starts to become more and more available, what happens is the identity starts to become the thing that's doing the release. It's the thing that's doing the path. The lower identity is doing the path. And when we are in that space of the lower identity coming into acknowledgement and realization of and perception of this refinement, it creates a tremendous amount of dukkha. And we have to remember, dukkha is not the philosophizing of unsatisfactoriness. It's not we have to move beyond the conceptual understanding, conceptual wisdom that we might think of as wisdom, where we hear a thing and then we go, oh yeah, I understand that. That's obviously this. This isn't philosophy. This isn't conceptual. And even in some Buddhist type frameworks, they have this thing they call non-conceptual wisdom. And that comes about as a result of a developing relationship with emptiness as emptiness. And this leads to that non-dual relationship, which is a dichotomy, I know, because a relationship depicts two things relating, but the non-dual realization starts to arise. Okay, now as this arises, that changes things, because that gives us the potential for non-concept, non-conceptual wisdom. And this becomes a real foundation, we could say, of the path. So the suffering becomes more and more intense, so we want a distraction from that. And this is where going into retreats can be very, very valuable, because when you go into retreat, you don't have the option of engaging in your habits. That's taken away, right? So we're warding off our own worst through making it so it's something that we don't have the option to engage in, right? And it's that transition into the depths of your meditative process and experience, and of course non-experience, and on it goes, that your worst is more and more likely to come out. So we want to prepare for that by making it a non-possibility, so that you can burn off that karma through the process that you go through. You can burn off that karma instead of acting it out, instead of having those refined habits work through you and essentially you are the puppet. In that case, we want to actually move through that. Now, like we said, the willpower, the discipline to do that from a higher standpoint, this is a very tricky thing, because as we go through this process of release, we, as we said, release the part of ourselves that was in that was able to control that. So you get some very erratic tendencies. The ease of addictive tendencies that you see in people on the path is really something entertaining. So whatever those habits might be, and you do your best to have them at least not be destructive to others, and hopefully not too destructive to yourself. Okay, so this keeps refining, and this keeps unlocking deeper and deeper levels of dukkha. So you need to move through that. Now, non-conception, non-philosophizing, this is a very real existential angst and pain, a very real psychological pain, a very real emotional pain, and very real physical pains, because we become aware of that of us which is locking in. And the more refined we get, the more we perceive that contrast, right? Because the alignment is always in a process of awareness increases, dukkha, and then actual skill and cultivation and dissolution grows. I'm getting pretty good at this. Oh, I'm real good. And then awareness, dukkha's almost gone at this point. And then, awareness kicks up again, and bang, we're back in the process. Okay, so we have to be aware of this. Now, we mentioned the black and white mirror. We mentioned the evolution of who and what we are. And this becomes crucial to the continued evolution upon the path, because anything that is in contrast to that emptiness, to that higher frequency of light you might be starting to resonate with, anything in contrast to that becomes very obvious and pain. So your own thoughts, you start to recognize that the quality and nature of your thoughts, the content of your thoughts, is actually very important, because they impose form on that mental energy, and that goes out beyond you. Because you can experience and perceive how the thought forms of others affect you and the environment, you are very aware of how your own thought forms affect the environment, right? As within, as all about. So the same applies to the emotions. The same applies obviously to the body. If somebody punches you in the face, that hurts. Following recognition, realization that if you punch somebody else in the face, that would probably hurt them. The same applies emotionally and psychically as well, through the thoughts in the mental plane, right? Now, that's noted, and then it starts to evolve, and you start to recognize how the quality of your thoughts might be creating contractions, might be creating these negative contractions or stagnations to that flow. How the quality of your feelings and emotions is in acting in contrast to that evolution. And this allows for you to start to unwind these karmic recycling plants, we could say, that bring our past experience back into the present again and again and again and again, until we go deep enough into this that we can actually, I could say, sever the root or starve the root of these particular issues, right? These particular habits. So that becomes very, very important that you actually do the black and white mirror. Now, problem with this is that we do the black and white mirror from the place and perspective of our lower identity, the lower three-dimensional identity, the part of us that is trying to control. Okay? So the controlling aspect of ourselves, this, this tries to do the black and white mirror. Then we end up fabricating the black and white mirror and creating an identity. Maybe it's better, right? But it is still something that's created. And because it's created, it's something that we have to cling to keep in place. We have to hold it there. So it will be in contrast to that higher evolution eventually. Now, it might be a good stepping stone, right? Maybe not walking down the street punching people in the face is better than walking down the street and punching people in the face. So you create an identity, you create forced control to start to alleviate these negative habits, right? And this, so you start to look at your emotions, your perception, your judgmental nature, your entitlement, your jealousy, your this, your that, yeah, blah, 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 blah. How is it that you are emotionally and mentally walking down the street and punching people in the face? You explore this, and you elevate the quality of your emotions. You elevate the quality of your thoughts, and this is initially done through control. Because this is done through control, like we said, it's something we will have to evolve beyond. As we evolve beyond this, then we have to evolve beyond control to the higher octave of control, which is freedom, right? The control is only there as a stepping stone. It might be necessary, okay, but how does freedom enter into this? Well, the whole path, we could say, from the Buddhistic standpoint, freedom from suffering, etc., liberation from that. Well, it doesn't come through contractive imposition, it comes through evolution. Evolution of what? Evolution of the thing that has those thoughts, the thing that has those feelings, etc. So this is where we run into the issue of what is it that is engaging in the process that we are working through. What is in charge? And that's the thing that we're working with. That's the thing that's evolving. So as we keep working through this, that thing keeps disappearing. And as it keeps disappearing, this allows us the opportunity to start to work into higher aspects of evolution and emptiness and so on. Okay, and this can unlock more and more of this dukkha experience. And what frees us from the dukkha experience more and more and more is the existing beyond that, right? And this is that constant process of recognizing where clinging is and breaking away from that clinging, breaking away from those contractions, breaking away from that aspect of ourselves, which is clinging to stagnation, right? Clinging to stagnation in contrast to that constant change, that constant flux and flow. So where we run into an easy barrier here is attachment to the lower identity's understanding of what non-attachment is, of what flux and flow is, of what that constant change means. So it becomes very important that we are able to isolate, identify, and choose that which we find union with, so that we can find freedom within a higher octave of unity along the path, instead of just allowing our exposed lowest subconscious desires to run the show. Because if we just work on surrender all the time, very often we aren't actually surrendering. We are we are simply falling to our lowest, to our habits, and allowing those habits to pick us up and take us, for a ride. So we want to be very, very clear about this as we work through this, so that our best is present, right? Our we fall to our highest. This is very difficult to do outside of a retreat setting, because as we keep refining, it's these subtle just movements, these flicks of the mind that can create a whole tailspin if the environment isn't perfect. We're talking at the high end of your development, right? At the cusp, at the barrier, to that cusp of that which is even more refined than your current space that you inhabit. So because we're touching the cusp of that, that is where the retreat environment can be very, very valuable. And that's why I encourage people, especially when they're coming to do retreats with me, whether it's online or in person, that during that time and leading up to it, you start to relinquish your habits. You start to relinquish the things that you do in your downtime to unwind, whether that's playing a video game or watching TV shows and movies, going on to social media and gossiping and whatever, everything that you do to distract yourself from that dukkha. If we can, as a simple practice, before even meditating, just get comfortable being there with yourself as you are, and not have so much fear of this distracted, of this pain, this angst that causes us to pull, to reach for distraction. That's a good place, a very good place to start. And if you can get that under control, then that will ease your way along the path a fair bit. Okay, so as we talked about freedom from the black and white mirror, freedom from the negatives, as we mentioned that, we need to, of course, mention that a byproduct of dissolution, of greater octaves of surrender, of release, the refinement of this process, as this unfolds, you have to change. And you will find that instead of doing your black and white mirror, you simply change. You simply are different. You are no longer in resonance with the lowest of your previous habitual views of the mind, habits of the mind. You're no longer in resonance with your previous habits and identifications of particular bandwidths of emotion, etc. So you can't think those things. You can't feel those things, because the old tuning forks are no longer there. They're tuned to something different, right? So the evolution, the type of way that you fall to your lowest, all this stuff, it changes. And because you are different, you no longer you don't have to do those things. You become something greater. You become something that isn't of those particular densities anymore. When this happens, your friends change, your environments change, your interests change. What you do for your downtime changes, because you aren't in resonance with those particular densities and distractions any longer. So you cannot help but change. And if you are finding that the process is throwing up a lot of pain and suffering, and this dukkha is a lot to contend with, very often it is because we are holding on to these things. We want the familiarity of the past, right? We have been with, let's say it's your friends. Maybe you've had the same friend group for 20 years. Maybe as you start to go through this, you find that you have less and less satisfaction in spending time with those people. But as you evolve, you might find that you are coming into contact with a different people of a different resonance, people that are more aligned and in tune with your current resonance. And this is a constant evolution. So the attachment to our attachments is something that we need to look at. The aversion to our aversions is something that we need to look at. And of course, that space in between, the often near enemy of equanimity, which we could say is apathy and indifference, is also something that needs to be considered. Okay, as you go through this, you change, and we have to be okay with that. And the people who are in our lives have to be okay that we're going to change. So, dukkha, identity, right? The evolution of these, the dissolution of these, they, oddly enough, seem to be almost one and the same. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for your time. If you're interested in training, I have a retreat coming up November 2025. This is has options for 1 week, 16 days, and 30 days. This will be 5 hours a day of transmission, training, meditation, and we'll be looking through a bunch of stuff. So you can check the website for descriptions there on the retreat. There's, of course, the online training programs in both Hermetic Alchemy, Qi Gong, meditation, and Tai Chi. These come with access to the Zenden, which is a Q&A video reference library, and there's hundreds of videos up there at this point. So questions that you have, I get up a video answer for you as soon as I have time and service to upload it. And I think that's everything. Have fun, practice. See you next time. Bye.